cause I'm free to whatever, there's no rush.
So many boys in here, where do I begin? I see this one, I'm about to go in. Then he said, I'm here with my friends. He got to thinking, and that's when he said,
Where the buzz, cause I'm free to whatever, there's no rush.
so many boys in here, where do I begin? I see this one, I'm about to go in. Then he said, I'm here with my friends. He got to thinking,
she's real pretty and she's real into you, and then she's sleeping inside of you. And the talking leads to touching, then the touching leads to sex, and then there is no mystery left. And it's bad news, I don't blame you. I do the same thing, I get lonely too. And your bad news, my friends tell me to leave you. That you're bad news, bad news, bad news. You're bad news, baby, you're bad news. And you're bad news, baby, you're bad news. And you're bad news, I don't care, I like you. And you're bad news, I don't care, I like you. I like I go ooh ooh, you go la 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 la, la la la. I can la 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 la. I wanna get what I want. Don't stop. Give me what you got. 'Cause I can't wait any more. Don't even talk about the consequence. 'Cause right now you're the only thing that's making any sense to me, and I don't give a damn what they say or what they think. 'Cause you're the only one who's on my mind. I'll never ever let you leave me. I'll try to stop time forever. Never wanna hear you say goodbye. Bye. I feel so untouched and I want you so much that I just can't resist you. It's not enough to say that I miss you. I feel so untouched right now. Need you so much somehow. I can't forget you. Been going crazy from the moment I met you. Untouched, and I need you so much. See you, breathe you, I want to be you. Ah la la la, ah la la la. You can take time to live the way you gotta live your life. Give me all of you. Don't be scared to see it through the lonely nights and wanting more. Don't even think about what's right or wrong or right. 'Cause in the end it's only you and me, and no one else is gonna be around to answer all the questions left behind. And you and I are meant to be, so even if the world falls down today, you still got me to hold you up. And I will
Waste time with the masterpiece, to waste time with the masterpiece. You should be rolling me, you should be rolling me. You're a real life fantasy, you're a real life fantasy. But you're moving so carefully, let's start living dangerously. Talk to me, baby. I'm rolling up from this sweet, sweet baby. Whoa. Let's lose our minds and go fucking crazy. Keep on hoping we'll be cake by the ocean. Walk for me, baby. I'll be pretty, you'll be Naomi. Whoa. Let's lose our minds and go fucking crazy. Keep on hoping we'll be cake by the ocean. Goddamn, see you licking frosting from your own hands. Want another taste? I'm begging, yes, man. I'm tired of all this candy on the dry land, dry land. Oh, waste time with the masterpiece, to waste time with the masterpiece. You should be rolling me, you should be rolling me. You're a real life fantasy, you're a real life fantasy. But you're moving so carefully, let's start living dangerously. Talk to me, baby. I'm rolling up from this sweet, sweet baby. Whoa. Let's lose our minds and go fucking crazy. Keep on hoping we'll be cake by the ocean. Walk for me, baby. Walk for me now. I'll be pretty, you'll be Naomi. Whoa. Let's lose our minds and go fucking crazy. Keep on hoping we'll be cake by the ocean. Keep on hoping we'll be cake by the ocean. Keep on hoping we'll be cake by the ocean. Hey, you're fucking delicious. Talk to me, girl. Talk to me, baby. I'm rolling up from this sweet, sweet baby. Whoa. Let's lose our minds and go fucking crazy. Keep on hoping we'll be cake by the ocean. Walk for me, baby. I'll be pretty, you'll be Naomi. Whoa. Let's lose our minds and go fucking crazy. That's right. Keep on hoping we'll be cake by the ocean. Keep on hoping we'll be cake by the ocean.
So you say you never been in love, that you don't even know what that means. You thought you did, but now that it's over you think can't even be half of the real thing. But as time goes on and on, I can feel my heart growing colder and colder. But then I see your face in the crowd, I think I'm gonna be starting over. Cause when you meet someone new, it all just takes over you. And you think that you never really tried. Open your heart, open your mind. Girl, you're gonna take me back to a time when I loved and I meant it. Girl, you're gonna save me, give me a chance. It's worth taking. Girl, you're gonna take me back to a time when I loved and I meant it. Girl, you're gonna save me, give me a chance. It's worth taking. Oh. And we always say the same old things, and we always use the same tired lines. Staying up all night, talking it out, ending up with no one on our side. And as time goes on and on, I can feel my heart growing colder and colder. But then I see your face in the crowd, I think, how can it be starting over? Cause when you meet someone new, it all just takes over you. And you think that you never really tried. Open your heart, open your mind. Girl, you're gonna take me back to to a time when I loved and I meant it. Girl, you're gonna save me, give me a chance. It's worth taking. Girl, you're gonna take me back to a time when I loved and I meant it. Girl, you're gonna save me, give me a chance. It's worth taking. Oh, it's worth taking. Oh. Cause when you meet someone new, it all just takes over you. And you think that you never really tried. And you think that you never really tried. And you think that you never really tried. Open your heart, open your mind. Girl, you're gonna take me back to a time when I loved and I meant it. Girl, you're gonna save me, give me a chance. It's worth taking. Girl, you're gonna take me back to a time when I loved and I meant it. Girl, you're gonna save me, give me a chance. It's worth taking. Girl, you're gonna take me back to a time when I loved and I meant it. Girl,
You shout it out, but I can't hear a word you say. I'm talking loud, not saying much. I'm criticized, but how your bullets ricochet. Shoot me down, but I get up. I'm bulletproof, nothing to lose. Far away, ricochet. You take your aim. Far away. You shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. You shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. Cut me down, but it's you who have further to fall. Ghost town, haunted love. Raise your voice, sticks and stones may break my bones. Talking loud, not saying much. I'm bulletproof, nothing to lose. Far away, ricochet. You take your aim. Far away. You shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. You shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. Stone heart, machine gun, firing at the ones who run. Stone heart, those bulletproof glass. Shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. You shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. You shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. You shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am
If you're gonna tell them everything, tell them I'm a good kisser. Tell them all the things you told me in your desperate whisper. If you're gonna tell them everything, don't leave out the good part. Tell them the way that you broke.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on MarshStream, your public performance broadcast platform. My name is Brianna Caver, assistant producer for MarshStream, and we are back again tonight for Solo Arts Heal and Can Edition. Although our theater doors are now back open, there are still some folks unable to attend these live performances, so these free streaming performances are brought to you by patrons just like yourself, all who donate to our tip jar. The link is posted in the chat and is also available on our website at themarsh.org. Remember, all donations are tax deductible and 100% matched. We need you now more than ever so we can continue to bring these free streaming performances to our community. If you are watching us live on YouTube, welcome and thank you for joining us. Please make sure you subscribe to be notified when we go live and watch the hours of free interviews and events we have archived all right there on our channel. Friday at the Marsh San Francisco is Fred Pitz's Aren't You at 7:30 p.m. Saturday at the Marsh Berkeley is Josh Kornblue's Citizen Brain at 5 p.m. At the Marsh San Francisco is Reciprocating Pumps at 7 p.m. and Dawn Reed's The Never Too Late Show at 8 p.m. Sunday at the Marsh San Francisco, be sure to check out our Sunday Streets booth at 10 a.m., starting at 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., closely followed by Dawn Reed's The Never Too Late Show at 5 p.m. and Reciprocating Pumps in the SF studio at 5 p.m. Again, please donate to our tip jar. Thank you for joining us. And now let's welcome your host, Alexa Jen.
Thank you so much, Brianna. And thank you, everyone. My name is Alexa Jett. I'm filling in for Rick Davis tonight. But I do want to start off with a quote from Rick, which is that nothing beats peer support, which is what we do at ANCAN. We're all peers here, and we do peer-to-peer support. For me, in a lot of ways, this show is coming full circle. You'll hear about some of my connection to the situation that our guest was in, and I am so excited. She is a mother of both humans and a cat. She is a force to be reckoned with. She is more than just a one-woman show. She is a one-woman force. It is my honor and privilege to welcome Susie Campbell.
Thank you so much, Alexa. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Susie. I have been so excited to talk to you. At ANCAN, we really lean into difficult topics because we know that it's so much easier if we can just talk about things. And so we will get to some of your history and your bio and art and stuff, but I wanted to ask you a very particular question first. We had a webinar a couple months back about pelvic floor therapy, and one of the therapists, Dr. Tracy Scher, said that you would not be embarrassed to go see a doctor about an elbow injury, a shoulder injury, or anything like that. But so many people are scared to go for something personal, pelvic, any issue with that. And a lot of what you're going to be talking to us tonight, we're just going to talk about it openly, and that's great. So why do you think these topics we don't talk about, even though they're so important?
I think in general, women are shamed of a lot of things with our bodies, especially associated with pleasure. Women's pain and pleasure are often dismissed. And so it makes it really hard for us to speak up, even to doctors, even to women doctors, about things that matter to us. And so I don't know whose fault it is. It can't be the medical communities alone. It's society in general. But I think for me, that's what it comes down to, is not taking pain seriously for women and not believing that pleasure matters.
Yeah, those are both very good points about the pain and pleasure spectrum of pain isn't taken very seriously. And honestly, pleasure and sexual health are quality of life issues that we like to talk about at ANCAN. Those things are just as important as your blood pressure or anything else. So I'm really glad we're going to dive into this tonight. Part of what I wanted to ask you, could you give us a little bit of a brief background on a little bit of how we got here? And then the follow-up question to that is, have arts always played a role in your life?
Yeah, definitely. So I met my ex-husband when I was 19 and then had sexual partners before him, but none in the entire time we were together. And at 30, I found out I had high-risk HPV and had my first abnormal pap smear. And I didn't know for a very long time a lot about high-risk HPV. And so I've learned a lot since then, and that it can kind of sit dormant and you just don't know you have it for a long time because most people get rid of it pretty easily. And when it just didn't go away and didn't go away, things escalated to where my story will go now. But as for the arts, I think I've always been a writer, but I didn't know it until very recently. I throwing a little information in journals, or I had found so many different like Google Docs where like I started writing something down, and I'm like, that's story. And I just, 5 years ago, Susie, didn't realize that it's okay to say you want to try something new
Yeah.
when you are an adult, and that you can be good at it, and that's a good thing. So yeah.
That's awesome. And I love that you brought up that point. I think there's a stigma that we have that when you're out of college, the learning ends, the trying new things ends, and that's not what it has to be at all. So would you give us a little bit of background? Because I know you're going to be talking about it in your story tonight, which the title itself, very eye-catching and very attention-grabbing, I would say. Can you talk to us a little bit about, your sexuality and pregnancies before you were diagnosed with the high-risk HPV?
Yeah, definitely. So, I think I've always been a very sexual person, and that was something that was always very important to me. And my first child, Sydney, she's 8. She was born 8 years ago, and her pregnancy was not easy. But she came to this world like fierce and ready to go. Like she was just
Oh,
like, yep,
okay.
like I am here. But then after that pregnancy, I had a lot of mood issues as well. So that made it the first few years of her life really hard. And so then when I got pregnant for the next time, I think it was in between those 2 pregnancies that I found out about the HPV, and I had my first abnormal pap smear, and everything was fine with the biopsy in between, and things were good. So I went forward and had 2 more pregnancies that unfortunately ended in miscarriage. And then it was between my 3rd pregnancy and my 4th, which resulted in my son Marshall. He is 4, that the HPV had actually gone away, and we're like, oh, great. And then when Marshall was, I can totally math, when he was like when he was like 2.5, that's when I had the abnormal pap smear. They're like, actually, this is worse now. So it's not, the HPV is not just back, but the cell changes are not what we have been seeing. So.
Sure. So how did that affect you as a mother? I feel like when health issues come up, it changes our perspective on things, and it can really make us pause and reflect. And how did that impact you in that way?
Yeah, I think that there was so much going on in my life at that time, between, the postpartum mood issues and the miscarriages, and, a lot of mental health stuff that my doctors were kind of downplaying the procedures that I was having, which was good for me. I mean, it was nerve-wracking, it was painful,
Mhm.
it was not a fun experience. But it was always just kind of like it's no big deal. Like, we'll look at it next time. Or like, I think one of the pap smears was even like right at the beginning of one of my pregnancies. And they're like, no, it's fine. Like we don't need to do the biopsy right now. We can wait until after you give birth. And so I think that was kind of helping me to stay relaxed about it. I'm like, okay, well, if they're telling me it's not a big deal, then I'm going to think it's not a big deal. And so I think that got me through that period.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting about there's the stigmatization of women's health issues, and in some way, with the way that the doctors were communicating with you, it's just such a complicated thing,
Yeah.
It's really just so complicated. That's why I'm glad we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Would you touch for our audience a little bit more about some of your postpartum issues? Because that's definitely something we don't talk about a lot. And how did you get help for that?
Yeah, definitely. So I found out in high school that I had depression. I was diagnosed with clinical depression. It was something that was never a surprise to me. But for a variety of reasons, I didn't start taking antidepressants until I was 26. And I'd been in therapy for years and like, this is great. Like, I'm doing good. Like everything's wonderful. But turns out things were a little too wonderful, because when Sydney was born, everything was like on top of the world until she was like 3 months old. And then I crashed because I was taking an SSRI, and it turns out I don't have clinical depression. I have bipolar 2 disorder.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it took like this great, like wonderful experience with my newborn, and everything became hopeless for a very long time. And so it took a long time for us to realize like what was going on, and that my diagnosis was wrong and how to treat it effectively with medication. But I ended up also having to do a partial hospitalization program, and do an outpatient program in order to take time to get the help I needed, which didn't entirely help, but it was the starting point. And so the best thing that came out of that was my relationship with my psychiatrist now for the last 9 years. She truly understands me. She understands where I've been. She knows every medication I've ever tried to take. And being able to have such a positive relationship with a medical professional come out of one of the most terrible times of my life, I think is something that I'm very grateful for my health, for my mental health.
Absolutely, because mental health is a part of all of our health just in general.
Yeah.
So from what I'm hearing from you and kind of your story, there's been a lot of ups and downs of, oh, well, it's depression. And then you find out that it's bipolar disorder. And then, oh, this pap smear is fine. Don't worry about it. So then you're high risk again, which is what we're actually about to go into right now. And I would like, because we're about to go into your one woman show right here, I'd like for you to kind of set up what we're going to hear and kind of give us a little backstory about it.
Yeah. So there was one point in my journey last year. So I in 2022 in January, I left my husband, and we had been together for 15 years. And then 3 weeks later, I had the first surgery that we thought was going to be just taking care of the high risk HPV and the pre-cervical cancer that I had. And like, that was going to be it. And it wasn't, and as you will find out, but during that time, I was really worried about what the rest of my life was going to look like, what dating was going to be like. I just left this relationship and what was going to happen. And after there had been a complication, I wrote the first part of the story as a rant on Reddit. And I made a post and I'm just like, this all sucks. And I posted it and then I read it to somebody and they're like, you should keep reading that out loud. And I wrote what you're going to hear as I was living it. It truly helped me to heal and give perspective to myself through this whole experience.
Well, you have sold me and definitely sold our audience. So Susie, come on and please share your story with us.
Ending my marriage was the best and hardest decision I've ever made. The 15-year relationship was over long before I moved out. So when I started my new life as a single mom, I was itching for connection to something other than my vibrator. But shortly after moving out, I was suddenly faced with 3 back-to-back surgeries on my lady parts. The timing was not ideal, but 5 years of medical drama was coming to an end with a hysterectomy at 35. Abnormal pap smears and cervical biopsies due to high-risk HPV that simply wouldn't go away would no longer be my problem. Naturally, after all 3 surgeries were scheduled, the only thing I could focus on was just wanting to get fucked. Every doctor judged me for it, except for one. My oncologist, which I never thought I'd say those words. She was the only one who got it. Wasn't the least bit judgmental. I thought it was because oncologists see patients who feel they might not have much time. But as I got to know her, I realized it's because she's a good human and understands that sex matters. I didn't have cancer, thank God, but I lost my uterus and cervix anyways. Going to medical appointments was interesting as my doctors were learning what my priorities were. Before and after each procedure, I'd ask, when can I masturbate again? When can I have sex? Initially, I was met with the same look that said, shouldn't you be focused on your health right now? Since when isn't sexual health important to psychologists? Apparently, they thought I should have been sitting at home alone, binging Netflix and mourning the loss of my uterus. But personally, I was happier trying to take my cervix out for one last spin. To do that, I had to find people to actually have sex with. Trying to meet someone in the age of online dating, in the era of a global pandemic, was challenging enough. Add in the complicated schedule of a single mom, insert surgery schedules, and I got tiny windows of time where sex and dating were even possible. Being on the dating apps started off so fun. Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, they're all different, all the same. And as I found out, not so fun at all. I instantly obsessed over making my profiles perfect. I crafted and recrafted, then deactivated and reactivated my profiles so often, I don't know that they stayed the same for more than 12 hours. I was describing myself as slightly ridiculous, witty, funny, genuine, self-aware, and easily excitable. I would include anecdotes about how lemon Kit Kats are absolutely the best, or ask people not to squish spiders. But I don't think the cute was really working because I really should have just been giving people a warning. I'm going to overshare deeply personal information about myself way too soon because I have a lot going on, but I'm horny as hell and we're all just here to get laid anyways, right? That may have been more effective. And hindsight is often 20/20, but I really don't think it actually would have worked. My matches were unsurprisingly all over the place. The good ones were just okay, and the bad ones were bad. Immediately after matching, I had one man grill me for 15 minutes about my sexual preferences, then inform me that I simply was not sex positive as my profile stated, because I wouldn't enthusiastically agree to perform every sex act he described. I met somebody who looked so different from his pictures that when he sat down, I actually thought he was at the wrong table. One of my dates was going so horribly that even the woman sitting at the table next to us seemed uncomfortable. Luckily, after going to the bathroom, I realized that my parking meter had expired and had to make a quick exit. Each failed match, I learned a little more about myself, a lot more about dating, but mostly that I desperately needed to get fucked. What would have been great is if I'd been able to meet someone, actually just laugh and flirt until we wanted to fuck each other's brains out. Then when I threw my upcoming surgery schedule at them, they didn't suddenly remember that their parking meter was expired. Throw on top of all of this, rejections due to that pesky HPV that caused this whole mess. And I might as well have lived a dramedy on HBO. I can see it now. I'm a single mom who just wants to get laid. Horrible first dates and constant rejection for losing her baby factory forever. That is not what I want the movie of my life to be about. If it was an upside, it's that the risk of accidental pregnancy went down to 0 with that baby factory gone. Maybe that's something I should add to my Tinder profile. The factory was torn down. The newly installed playground. No more oopsie daisies. Me without risk of attachment for 18 years. Eight Flow's monthly reservation was canceled. Sex welcome 365 days a year. No? Well, might be too much. In the meantime, let's discuss complications. Complications are always a joy. One of many freakouts is brought to you by an infection at the surgery site. So there was this one weekend that I had counted on for a month. I called it the golden weekend because it fell between the last two surgeries after the safe sex window should have opened, was the only kid-free weekend I had before the hysterectomy. It included 2 much anticipated dates, and I informed multiple medical professionals that I absolutely had to be cleared for it. Yeah, that one was toast. Really too much to ask to have sex one more time before losing major reproductive organs? I didn't think so. Before taking a 2-month break in sexual activity, when the ability to explore just became possible, well, maybe. Was I too fixated on it? Probably. But did it happen? It did. Then before some quarantine for my hysterectomy at 35 years old, I had sex one last time with my uterus and cervix intact. I thought it would feel so satisfying, momentous even, but really felt like just another hookup. At best, some mediocre casual sex. And afterwards, I felt kind of sad. Spent the first 5 months of my single life waiting to see if I had actual cancer. I've been so focused on just wanting to get fucked. I wouldn't admit I was actually scared. Surgery after surgery, recovery after recovery, pathology report after pathology report. And the whole time, I'd been asking myself, is anyone going to want to date me? Am I ever going to get laid? Will how I experience pleasure be different? That felt so important. I never even considered the possibility that having sex wouldn't actually matter. Once the last surgery was over, I saw it so clearly. There were so many people trying to tell me that everything was going to be okay, that I wasn't alone, and there was so much time to date in the future. The sentiments were lost on me because I'd lived my life in short-term intervals for so long. I could only see the next hurdle in front of me. Move out, have surgery, wait for results, recover, try to have sex. Have surgery, wait for results, recover, try to have sex. Have surgery, wait for results. What comes next? Now that I'm not constantly recovering from surgery and trying to have sex, what do I do? How do I live life as a single mom? Do I date? Do I enjoy my newfound freedom alone? Is there only one answer? Asking myself if it really had been too much to ask to have sex before the surgery that changed my body forever. Before having sex was replaced yet again by a more intimate relationship with my vibrator. Was such a thing as being too fixated on this? Nobody can answer these questions but me. And I for sure do not have those answers. Well, I have to admit, I do know there is definitely such a thing as being too fixated on this. I also know I want the movie of my life to be about a newly single mom who just wants to get laid, leaps over hurdles, and beats the odds. before finding happiness within herself. Searching for happiness starts with accepting that there's a space in my pelvis where my womb used to be. The womb that carried all of my babies, including those I've only held in my heart. A womb that served its purpose, whose memory caused me to bring a hand to my abdomen occasionally without even thinking about it in the weeks following the surgery. It had been 3 years since my last baby lived in that womb, and I was so done having kids. But believing my family is complete and knowing I can never have more children are two very different things. I'm accepting that this twisted adventure wasn't about having sex. It was a distraction from the emotions I wasn't ready to feel. I was a newly single mom going to medical appointments where very scary words were being used. Instead of dwelling on the fear, when I went home to my empty apartment, I looked for connection. I looked for ways to make me forget that I thought I was all alone. The connections I was making helped make it a little bit easier, even if just for an hour. Processing this was not easy. My therapist had her work cut out for her. She helped me work through why, when emailing my oncologist, sex came up more often than test results. When forming attachments to unavailable men is what I focused on for months. Why I thought that losing my uterus would make me undateable and undesirable as a partner. Now, I'm moving forward with my life, living a life post fear of developing cancer. A life filled with love, pleasure, and happiness. I'm not rushing love. That will hopefully happen for me again someday, but it's not the priority. Life is about rediscovery right now. Pleasure, however, will always be my priority. But happiness? What does that even look like? Right now, I'm happy that getting a divorce felt empowering and not scary. About people showing up for me when I thought I was all alone. I had dozens of great interactions with interesting people and some lifelong friends, all because I decided to let my libido rule my life for 6 months. Exploring sexuality is so much fucking fun. Medical science prevented my pre-cervical cancer from becoming actual cancer. No cancer definitely makes me happy. And let's face it, when I'm happy, I can actually focus on the important things in life, like family, good health, connection, and of course, just wanting to get fucked.
Susie, wow. If you were actually in the Marsh Theater right now, we would be filled with applause. And for our audience, feel free to ask Susie questions in the Q&A. I know you're probably a little bit verklempt after that. I'm pulling myself together myself. So we will talk amongst ourselves right now. I wish I could highlight that and send it to so many people in the adolescent and young adult cancer community, because even though the diagnoses may be different, so many of the feelings and things you experienced are similar. I wanted to touch really quick on my personal connection to this, is that my mom, when she was pregnant with me, she had high risk cervical dysplasia as well. And so the entire time she was pregnant with me, she rode the roller coaster that you did as well, of, okay, you're kind of living, as we call it in the cancer community, scan to scan, test to test, biopsy to biopsy. And my mom had a lot of the same feelings you did. So my mom carried me to full term, and then shortly afterwards, they delivered me, and then she had a hysterectomy, and I was with her the whole time. And she was on the gynecological floor, and a lot of the nurses would come in and look at me and go, "You delivered that?" And she would like to go, "Yes, I did," because I was obviously I was not a newborn, so they really thought she was Superwoman. Like, where is the National Enquirer coming to take the pictures? But my mom saw it as an opportunity of just like, I'm period free. There's a lot of, this is a new phase of life for me. So a couple of things I wanted to ask you about is, I love Rick Says This, and I think he really put this into words for me, is that cancer takes away your choices. Cancer is a taker. And obviously one of the things you touched on is how cancer took your uterus, and basically, to put it very bluntly, is, as millennials do, kind of ended your childbearing career, essentially. So I'd like to ask you, did you have to grieve that? Was there a grieving process? Was it a process?
Yeah. I didn't think I would. I'm done having kids. I had 4 pregnancies, 2 babies. All of those pregnancies were very hard, ending in postpartum mood issues and complications. And like, I don't need to experience that ever again. I'm cool. Before the surgery, what I thought I was going to have to mourn the most was that 2 of my babies I've never held, and they only lived in my uterus. And so I really, really struggled with that in the beginning of like, how do I lose the only place 2 of my children lived? And one of those babies I lost the pregnancy very early. It was like, we barely even knew we were pregnant, and then it was gone. But the second I carried to 9 weeks, and, we found out she was a girl, and I named her. And so like, that was Lily's house, the only place Lily ever lived. So I struggled with that a lot before the surgery. When the surgery finally came, I don't think it passed through my head as much as I thought it was going to. And so I'm like, oh, okay, I'm cool. But then my older sister was pregnant when I was going through this. And it was like 4 weeks after the surgery, we had a baby shower for her that I planned with my other older sister. And at the baby shower, that was when it hit me. Like, I was watching her open all these little packages with the tiny little clothes that I remembered. And I remember going into the kitchen and I'm putting my hand like where my uterus should be. And I was just like, it's gone. Like, I just started stopping. I'm like, it's gone. Like, I'll never have a baby again. And I truly didn't expect to feel that, because I knew I didn't want more children. But yeah, it was that difference between like, I'm cool with the number of kids I have, and that I don't have a choice anymore.
Do you think that it was helpful for you? And I'm asking this question for the audience and for people who maybe aren't ready to talk about or as open as you are. Did you find that grieving process was helpful to allow yourself to feel that those feelings and those emotions?
I think it was necessary. If I didn't, I think I'd be stuck. And now I'm okay with it. I think now it more like just gives me the heebie-jeebies that there are like parts of my body that don't exist anymore. I'm like, is there just like an empty spot in my abdomen? Like, I know that's not actually how internal organs work, but like, not thinking about the fact that like my baby factory, essentially, like my womb is gone. Like, it's that my uterus is gone, I don't think of it as my womb anymore, because I did mourn it. I did heal from it, and I came to terms with it and was okay.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really important when you have cancer, even if it doesn't make sense, or if you are done with having children, or whatever situation that it is comparable in your experience. It's so important to feel the things you feel and mourn them, and they may be different than what you expect. The next thing I want to touch on is, it's something that we talk about with young people in cancer, and it's disclosure. I was very fortunate that my fiance Brian is also a cancer survivor, and we met at a cancer event. So it wasn't like I just decided to come. I mean, he kind of knew, like, she had cancer. So I didn't ever have to have that conversation with him. But disclosure is something we talk about a lot in the young adult cancer community. what has disclosure been like for you? Have you had any strange stories or any time people reacted funny or anything like that? What has your experience been like?
Yeah. I think I'm an overly truthful person. Like I feel like if I don't say something, like holding it back, I'm lying to you, even if it's information that like you don't need to know or don't have the right to know if you're a brand new person to me. Um, and I really struggled in the beginning with do I not disclose HPV to new partners? And the overwhelming um suggestion from the medical community is that you do not have to disclose that you have HPV because 80% of sexually active people have or will have it at some point in their life. There's no cure for it. You're not encouraged to be celibate. And so it's up to you if you should disclose it or not. I think the only exception to that is if you have an HPV version that causes genital warts, then that is spread differently than the non-symptomatic ones. And so here I was, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I feel like I need to be honest with this. And what kept getting stuck in my brain was that if I go on a date with somebody and then it turns out we have a relationship and I didn't talk about this, and then someday something happens where I need to tell them about things. And you're like, you didn't tell me you had HPV. Then I'm like, I thought like I would be perceived as this terrible person. So there were times where I was rejected before, during, or after a date. I had one person convinced that he could catch HPV from hugging me. He wouldn't touch me. It was bizarre. Somebody thought that he could get it from me and then give it to his small daughter. I'm like, I don't think you really understand how sexually transmitted infections work if that's what you think is going to happen. I don't know what's going on in your home. But people are generally pretty naive, is maybe one word, uninformed, is a little nicer word. But the people who do get it, the ones who have that they've had the HPV vaccine on their dating app profile, the ones who, understand sexual health are the ones that I make myself be around, because they're the ones who are like, oh, I'm really sorry you went through that. Not like, holy crap, you're going to give me some disease that's going to give me cancer. I'm the exception, not the rule.
I feel like our advisory board member, Dr. Rachel Rubin, who's a sexual health medicine specialist, she would enter the chat and go, this is why we need more education. If you believe that an STD or anything sexually transmitted can be caused by just being in close contact. One of the questions that I personally have that I wanted to ask is, I've always known this about my mom. I grew up hearing kind of my chaotic birth story, some of the stuff that had happened. And also, I, like a lot of children, would ask my mom, am I getting another sibling? And mom would have to always explain to me, I can't have children anymore. You're my last one. What she could have said is I stopped at the peak, but she didn't. She just was very logical with me about it. So I'm curious, just for myself, have you had to navigate that yet, of asking about, am I having another sibling, or having that conversation with your children?
Yeah. So they were 3 and 7 when I had the surgery. And so old enough to kind of understand that babies lived, in my tummy and whatever else happened from it. And so, we talked about the surgery in broad strokes at first, but then as things got closer, I explained that I wouldn't be able to have babies anymore. And so it has come up oh, I want a little sister. And the nice thing about your kids living in 2 houses and having an amicable divorce is I just feel oh, well, you're gonna have to talk to your dad about that. And
there you go. You've got a very good.
Yes. So luckily we are in a place where we can joke about things like that.
Oh, that's fantastic for the kids. And you've got a great one-liner there, which we have a question. And I think that this kind of leads into that is, do we have another story in the works? Because our questionnaire person wanted to know, have you used your written skills in the grieving process? And is there another one of your works in the works?
Yeah. So I So I started, after writing this last year, I started doing storytelling events across the city of Chicago. And so I have multiple stories that I do on different parts of my life last year and in the past. So I have a story I'm going to be performing in a couple weeks at a bar in Chicago called Mrs. Murphy's and Sons, in a show called Story Lab that I call Post-Polar. So it's about my journey through postpartum depression and being diagnosed with bipolar. And so that is definitely covers a lot of like the heavy emotional parts of my first and subsequent pregnancies and the fear I experienced with that as well. And so I really pride myself in talking about issues related to like reproductive health that we don't talk about in public and that we don't say. And I'm completely comfortable sharing tragic stories about my life on big public events. And so like, I feel like it's a responsibility for me to be able to share my experience and to tell people you're not alone. So there are other stories I perform as well. One of the best things that came out of last year in this quest to whatever happened was meeting my best friend on Tinder. So we had 3 dates and realized we didn't really have a romantic connection. And then he became my best friend. And I don't know how I would live without him. And I wouldn't write without him. He's my editor and like he like goes through everything with me. And so being able to share stuff like that too, non-traditional, like fun dating stories is something I enjoy as well. But I would really love to be able to write a one-woman show or a memoir or something to talk about women's health issues that just don't get talked about.
Yeah, now that you mention it, maybe if we need someone at ANCAN, we can look on Tinder too. Maybe, it's an option. It is an option. I love, because the whole reason why we do what we do at ANCAN is so people realize they're not alone. I love to tell people my favorite thing about ANCAN is when someone comes to one of our groups and they say something and another person goes, wait a minute, I thought I was the only person who had that. And they realize that they were not alone. So I think what you do is so important. And that leads me into my next question. So why is all of this, since you're planning on talking about it more, why is this so important, period? Why is this so important to you?
Yeah, I think, for a very long time, my life was kind of in a fog and didn't have purpose. And I felt overwhelmed about everything that I experienced. And I didn't have an outlet for it. I didn't have a space for me to process in a way that felt good and that it actually let me move on. And through not just writing, but writing and sharing it, I'm like giving myself space to say like what I experienced actually happened, that it's valid, and that there's nothing wrong with me because of it. And being able to tell other people about that is I think that piece of this that means that's why I do storytelling and not writing. It needs to be something that I actually tell people. Like having someone sit down and read my words feels very different than listening to me say them to you.
Yeah, and I think I saw a documentary one time about a young woman. She ultimately died of breast cancer, and it chronicled her experience. And the one quote that has always stuck with me that she said is, the most important gift you can give the world is your story. And I truly believe, because at least in my culture, storytelling is very important. And the way when I heard you describing how important, it's very different when I'm hearing the pain and the joy and the humor and stuff, when I'm hearing it directly from you, which is why I think storytelling is important and why this whole platform is really important, that we use storytelling to talk about these things. One thing I'd like to ask you is, how would you recommend somebody else, they've gone through a health condition, any type of thing that maybe we deal with at ANCAN, or just mental health issues or anything like that? How can you start putting pen to paper and writing your story? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think for that, I mean, this first one was just a rant. I got home from my doctor's appointment where I found out I had that infection. And
Mhm.
before that like golden weekend, I'm like, well, shit, like this was my one chance to have sex and it's not going to happen anymore. And I was just so mad. And so I just like sat down. I think it was on my phone, probably like sitting in my room. And I just like bitched and complained about everything. And then I put it on the internet and I'm like, okay, it's out there. It's fine. And a few people commented, but it was mostly just like, shut up, you're fine. So it's just like, it's Reddit, you know? But
It's the
then
internet.
exactly. But if I had just read those comments on the internet and been like, oh, well, no one cares, then that would have been the end of it. But instead, I read it back to myself and then I read it to somebody else. And then they validated me that like, hey, yeah, that did really suck. Like, I'm sorry. And then I just kept going back to it. And so part of my writing process is something that I've heard that nobody does or even wants to consider do, because nobody likes the sound of their voice except for apparently me. Like I'm like the only person in the world. But so like I will record myself reading something so that I hear it while I'm reading it. And so like hearing my voice being like, yes, this was something that happened to you, I think was one of the most important parts of it for me personally. So I think if you're wanting to write to heal, finding that part that feels best for you, like how is it going to be like to put it out there somewhere public? Is it going to be to write it down? Is it to be to go somewhere? I do a lot of my writing at the beach near my house or like walking down the street or like whatever, like it comes in really weird places. So just kind of embracing how it feels good and don't worry about how it's supposed to be. There is no supposed to in writing. It's what works for you and what feels good. And the product that you put out is supposed to be like what you do. I don't have any background as a writer. Like I was a sociologist and women's studies major in college, like, you know, a million years ago. And so like, I've got some like critical thinking skills and some like vague APA somewhere in the back of my brain, but I just write in a way that like feels good and genuine for me. So it's not like I have a degree in, you know, English literature or something. I just started writing one day.
Yeah, and what's kind of your format? Or are you a combination? Do you write on a laptop, on a computer, pen and paper, on your notes app, on your phone? Like what does that look
Yeah.
like for you?
A lot of the times when I have a new story, I'll draft it in Google Docs and I'll generally like if I'm like drying my hair in the morning or something, I have one of those like old school like bonnet hood things that you sit over and wear straight for curly hair, and I'm not embarrassed of it, I swear. But so like I'll be sitting drying my hair and I just have like 15 minutes and I'll start writing a story, and then pretty soon a draft comes together in a similar format where it's just like I've got 10 minutes, I'm going to sit throughout the day. And so once I have kind of a draft and I'm like, okay, this feels good, then I just like sit down on my computer and then I start kind of like reworking it and seeing like, okay, what's supposed to be here and what isn't, and then start expanding. And then I think by the time, and that could be like a couple hours, like I'll sit down my computer before dinner and then all of a sudden it's dark out and I'm like, I guess I was on a roll, you know? And then after that, I usually share it with somebody, my best friend. And either he will read or I just tell him to read it. And in the meantime, I've had like 4 other versions. I'm like, nope, don't read that one, read this one instead. And so like just knowing somebody's going to look at it, like kind of helps give me that motivation to maybe see it from their perspective. And then I also do the like record and listen while I'm reading it. And I listen while I'm walking down the street. I don't recommend doing it while driving because I've had to pull over and write a note down before more than once. And that's not very safe. So, but yeah, I think I have very much a combination of like the modern on the go writing on my phone and sit down, write at my computer in a coffee shop or something.
So we actually just got a fantastic question from our audience that I am excited to hear you answer. What advice would you give to someone who was just diagnosed?
So I actually was a moderator on the pre-cervical cancer subreddit for a year. And I saw a lot of people who came in with their first diagnosis, and it's scary. You go to a doctor's appointment and they're using all these letters to describe something that makes no sense. That's abbreviations for things that are scary. And the internet is not your friend. We all want it to be. You get the pathology report from, the automatic thing at 11 o'clock at night when your doctor's office is closed and you can't answer any questions and you're making assumptions. So
My chart is
think-
a blessing and a curse, is it not?
truly, yes. And yes, I luckily have some doctor friends that I could be like, what is this? But not everyone has that. And they're like, I shouldn't tell you that anyways. But I think for my advice for that is to look for support before look for answers. So you're not going to know anything until you see your doctor. You aren't going to know what type of pre-cervical cancer you have, what grade it is, until there's a pathology report that tells you that. So no doctor can look at your cervix and say, oh, by the way, you have high grade, blah, 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 because it looks like this. Like, because people say that, and then the biopsy is done and it comes back being low grade, or they tell you that, oh, this is no big deal. And then turns out you have the type of high grade that I have that like hid within my cervix. So like, you can't see it from looking at the cervix no matter what. And so you didn't know it was
Susie, you're
there until the
telling
biopsy
us
was done.
that
Right.
there's no such thing as like a cervix clairvoyant. That if you hear
Exactly.
that,
There's
run.
not. And so like, you're eventually going to have that information from a report. So until then, find support, and whatever that looks like, an online community, a friend. If it is like a nurse or doctor in your office that they let you send emails to say like, I'm freaking out today, a therapist, like support comes before action. And it's the most important part is to just find somebody or somebody's that you can trust.
That is a very Ann Can answer, since we're all about, obviously, as my background states, advocacy, support, and education. So I want to swing back a little bit. You had a wonderful playlist before we got started, because we asked all of our people, hey, you want a Spotify playlist and play the music? And it really kind of sets the mood. I love how different everyone's takes are and stuff. And a lot of the songs, since we're kind of in the same age group, I recognize. I'm like, yeah, that's my girl. I did music, because we are on an art show. Did music play a part in your process and your recovery, anything like that?
Yeah, music is a huge part of my life. And it was something I kind of realized actually after my divorce, just how much I'd been missing. Like I'd kind of like lost parts of myself in my marriage, and music was one of the first things that came back. And last year I was actually, because Spotify does the Wrapped like every year of like your top songs and stuff. So I listened to 118,000 minutes of music last year.
Wow.
That is the top 1% of Spotify listeners worldwide. Yes, so music is a lot. And so I was constantly finding songs either that people send me. I would ask people like, hey, send me a song you think I've never heard of. And I got a lot of really cool music from that. Or just finding friends too who are also music obsessed, and we would just swap songs, be like, oh, I liked this song today, send it to you. And then it comes back and all around. But I also, music has meaning a lot to me. And so the first song I played when I moved into my new apartment is on that playlist. I'm going to screw up her name, but it's the like Love Myself or something by Haley. Yes. Because it was like the words, I'm like, this is symbolic. I'm like, I love myself. I am alone for the first time. And then with the surgery, there was music that I think kind of like pushed me through of like everything's going to be okay. Like it's all going to be all right. And then of course, a lot of that playlist is just like, I just need to date and get fucked. And so like, we're going to listen to all of the songs about sex. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes the Spotify Wrap can really shine a light on areas in our life. Because even for myself last year, I'm like, wow, I went through a period. It was like, I was listening to that. What does that say? Should I take that to a therapist? So I love that music can give us that reflection, and Spotify Wrapped can. And I have a question for you. When I saw your playlist and just doing some background and stuff, because I'm so excited to interview you. I have a big question I want to ask. So I know that you're a fan of Taylor Swift. And right now, Taylor is on the Eras Tour, which I know everybody knows about because everyone's hearing it. And one of the biggest questions I wanted to ask you is, what era have you been in? And we're going to manifest right now. what era would you like to be in? What era would you like to go into?
Oh goodness. Huh. That's a big question. Okay. What So I think I've been in, what have I been in? I've been in the this survival mode, what comes next is next being tomorrow. And day to day, what, where where do I just need to get to next? But now,
Yeah.
so I don't know what I would really call that. So I don't know what era I would call that. But next, I think it's more, it's not even about the self-discovery. It's about living. I've done it. I made it through this hard stuff. And now it's going forward. If I'm thinking about it in terms of Taylor Swift, the Red album, I think of that as the breakup album. And so that was where I was at before. It was just all that sad but upbeat music because you're doing it. But where does it go next? It's not those sad lyrics anymore. It's the hopeful. It's the everything's gonna be all right. And you're gonna figure out what comes next. And I'm gonna thrive. I'm not just surviving anymore.
I love that. I love the way you put that. I was actually thinking about Red when you were reading your story. I'm like, I wonder if she's gonna identify with Red. And then, oh my gosh, that's so cool. So we are unfortunately, Susie, I wish I had 3 hours because I feel like there's so much we could dive into. And if you ever want to start a podcast with someone, just let me know. And there's so much we could talk about. So I unfortunately have to wrap this up, but I do have a final burning question for you from our audience. Have you been successful in your conquests? Have you been satisfied, and are you successful, or is your vibrator still your closest pal? I'm very curious.
Well, I think I feel like that's such a complicated question because it's supposed to be both, right?
Right.
Self-pleasure and mutual pleasure are both very important. So yes, I've had a lot of very positive experiences. I've had to change the way I really think about my sexuality and what
Yeah.
is defined as pleasure. That was a really big thing this year. And I think all the queer people in the world already know that sex is more than fucking, but I had to come to terms with that a little bit more than I had previously. So yes, there is, always will be, looking for and experiencing pleasure in all forms.
Susie, thank you so much. And I appreciate you saying that. I know when I was first diagnosed with cancer, I thought my life was over. I had so many thoughts, and I could hug that newly diagnosed Alexa today. I'd tell her that that's not true at all. And Susie, you tonight have done that for somebody else, I'm sure, and you're going to continue to do that. So thank you, Susie. You were such a fantastic guest, and we look forward to following you to your very famous one-woman show that I know you'll have in the future, and we will be following your eras. So everyone, thank you so much. I want to thank the Marsh. I want to thank John Ivory for Ann Can. And of course, I want to thank our host, Rick Davis. We have a fantastic show for you next month. Our guest will be is it Geneva or Genevieve Norman? Geneva, I think. And the theme is the doctor is in the hospital as a patient. You're going to hear about being a doctor and a patient. It's going to be real exciting. I'm looking forward to it. And of course, thank you so much to the Marsh. I will leave you with a thought that it is so important that we continue to tell stories like Susie and give a platform for this, because after all, Earth without art is just So please support the Marsh with the tip jar and put your support behind stories like this. Thank you so much from all of us here at ANCAN. And thank you again, Susie. We appreciate you guys so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alexa. Thank you, Susie. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Please check out our website for more information on our upcoming shows for the rest of this week. Don't forget to donate to the tip jar, and we hope to see you next time. Have a good evening.
How do I describe my journey with you?
Your mother, who takes care of you, who takes you to the doctor when you're sick. Your mother.
Good morning, New York. Buenos dias. It's me. What's up?
We went out for lunch at a sushi place where she tried sushi for the first time and she liked it.
I see that change can happen. I know things can shift and change for good.
I am dizzily dazzled with stars in my eyes.
Same level as I broke my neck. But he's not getting the same return of function I am.
And I don't want any of your smart aleck sex talk that I usually get when I get.
This is beyond the marsh because what you're doing is planting beautiful seeds for artists to grow.